Hey, welcome aboard to the GenWealth Radio Hour. And if you're watching online on our YouTube channel, we thank you for doing that as well. Settle in for our What's Happening segment, where our marketing staff has scoured social media and other sources to get some financial things that are making noise out there. And we're going to kind of talk about them and give you our 2 cents on them for the next 15 minutes or so. My name's Scott Inman, a financial advisor at GenWealth Financial Advisors in our West Little Rock office. And with me, co-founder of GenWealth, Janet Walker, today on the show. We've got some good stuff to talk about. And believe it or not, we're not going to talk about Greenland. At least not very much.
You are wearing a green shirt.
Yes,
does that count?
That's right. Boy, I never thought we'd be talking about that country all the time in the news. And it does have financial implications. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how that plays out, we know the market did not react well to the weekend news that President Trump wants Greenland, and mainly because of how he intends to get it by raising tariffs on European countries and their response. We'll talk about that this week in the fastest 4 minutes in finance. So on the GenWealth Radio Hour, you can hear that. You can also get it delivered directly to your email inbox every Friday by texting the word FAST to 501-381-5228. Again, that number is 501-381-5228. Just text the word FAST. We'll get you signed up. We're not going to blow up your email with a bunch of emails. We're just going to send you that video once a week on Friday morning, 4 minutes or less. That's why we call it the fastest 4 minutes in finance. And we will be talking about Greenland on that segment. But we're going to look at other things making financial noise out there. And we start today with this headline from Yahoo Finance. 1 in 3 Americans say their financial situation has deteriorated in the past year. That's according to a new survey. Now, we do want to note right off the bat, as you look at that, you can see the percentages overall describing the cost of living in the area where you live, and there are a lot of questions that were answered. The survey was actually conducted back in mid-June of 2025. They asked several questions of 2,575 U.S. adults, and finding that 1 in 3 say their personal financial situation has worsened in the past year. A couple other notes from that survey. Nearly half of Americans describe the cost of living in their area as unaffordable. Many households are facing a tight budget balance, with a significant share saying their monthly expenses exceed their income. Now, that is a big flashing red light. If you are now negative cash flow, that is time for a change. And I think my reaction to this, the first thing, Janet, when I read just the headline piece of that, I thought, well, their financial situation has worsened. Well, certainly I would think if they have money in the market or in their homes, their net worth has increased. Well, we actually find that a large portion of people do not know their net worth. That's a finding of this survey as well. So we're taking that off the table, and this is really about income and expenses. I think Americans who are sitting in those situations, I empathize with you, I sympathize with you, but you've got to do something. If you're waiting on the economy to change, we know inflation is going to be on a trajectory that may be high, it may be low, but it's going to continue.
Yeah, when I saw this, my reaction initially was, unless you have had a catastrophic year, if you've had, I'll give my example from many years ago now, when my husband developed some very significant health issues, and so we had all the medical expenses, much of which was not covered by health insurance, and then we also had the loss of his income. So we went from 2 incomes to 1, and we had over 6 figures in medical debt. Yeah, we were in worse shape than we were the year before that. But since then, we're not there. We made significant changes. And so what I would say, when we look at, 1 in 3 Americans say their financial situation has deteriorated in the past year, 1 in 3 Americans are not in a catastrophic situation. Yeah. So for those who are, we give grace, we give understanding and compassion. I get it. I have been there. Maybe not the exact details that you're going through, but I've been through the financial catastrophe. But now I stand on the other side at the edge of financial independence and go, hey, it's really good over here. Come on. And what you have to do is buckle down and learn and apply what you're learning. You need to seek financial education. You need to seek additional income. If you're at a job that sucks and has no way for you to move up, go do something else. Maybe you get a side gig for a while and then you move it into something else. Do not sit on the sidelines and accept that this is your future. And by the way, this deal, Scott, that you mentioned about a large portion of people don't know their net worth, that's on you. Like, take some time, figure it out. It really doesn't take that long. It's not a complex calculation for you to do. So figure out your net worth, because here's the deal on that. You cannot win if you don't even know where you are on the scoreboard. Like, you don't know, okay, do I have a 50-cent net worth? Do I have a negative net worth?
Yeah.
And people who their monthly expenses exceed their income, fix it. If you have to move somewhere where your expenses are less, fix it. If you have to make more money, fix it. If you have to stop buying as much, fix it. It's in your power. Do it.
You got to find a roommate to afford rent. I think that you can't continue to spiral in that, for sure. In the report here says that people are using a mix of strategies to cope with shortfalls, including cutting spending, absolutely, using savings if you have to short term, or relying on credit. And that's where that's kind of a stair step down the spiral right there. Cutting spending didn't work. Now I'm going to use savings. That didn't work. And now I'm relying on credit.
Scott, I'm going to tell a client story here. I called a lady who, some of our clients we are in touch with very frequently, and some of them just don't need or want us to do that. And so it had been a while since we had talked. And when I called her, she said, Janet, I'm so excited. Let me tell you where I'm at in life right now. And she's retired. She's in her 70s. And years ago, she went through the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace course that I led, and she learned all these financial concepts, financial truths, and she applied them. And so now, even though she has never made very much money, she is retired and she is saving $1,200 a month and adding $300 a month to her mortgage payment. That will be done before very long. And she's got a good little bit of savings in addition to a small amount that she had put back for retirement years ago. And so at this point, she said, Janet, I'm looking around at other people my age who are like, when their dishwasher goes out, they don't know what they're going to do. And I have all new appliances, and I paid cash for every single one of them. I'm not putting anything on credit. I don't have any debt except for the mortgage, and that'll be done soon. So I say all of that to say that we've got a retiree who, on relatively limited income, is still saving over $1,000 a month because she's making wise choices. You can do that too.
It can be done, for sure. And our second topic is kind of dovetailing off of that in the same category, but a little more specific. An Instagram post noting that the middle class cannot afford new cars anymore. The middle class isn't giving up on new cars by choice. They're being priced out, is what the article says from the Instagram post. And, this one, when I first read this headline, my thought was, okay, then don't get a new car.
Yeah, and that's okay.
There isn't, look, again, we don't mean to sound tone deaf in any way to the struggles that are real or out there, but you have options. To say that I have to get a new car every 4 years or I have to get a car every 3 years is not reality if it doesn't fit into your budget. You have to be able to afford what you drive. Now, I'm not a big fan of leasing, but that is an option to keep the payments lower if you can't do anything else. But the reality is there are other places besides car dealerships that you can even go and look for potentially a deal. We've got a young advisor in our West Little Rock office that bought his on Facebook Marketplace, and I know what he paid for both of his cars, and he has no loan on either one of those cars. They drive him from point A to point B. He's had very little trouble out of it in the couple of years that I've worked with him. So I know it can happen, and he's doing that because it fits into his budget. And I think that is a challenge for a lot of people, particularly with social media and seeing
Yeah.
what everybody else drives and seeing the advertisements. I get it. I like a new car too. Love the way it smells. But if I couldn't afford it, I wouldn't get it.
Yeah, Scott, we've been very blessed here at GenWealth internally with our team to have developed a culture where financial independence matters more than the new car. And so we see young team members who are just starting out in life. We had people who came here when they joined our team and they had car payments and it was ridiculous and they couldn't, just couldn't hardly make ends meet. And then they began to listen to what we teach and went, oh my gosh, I'm not doing this anymore. And they sold that car and got something that they could pay cash for. And now they don't have a car payment and they've got all of that lifted off of them. I would say to you, if you're in this boat where you're going, I can't afford a new car, it's okay. You can afford financial independence, and it doesn't necessarily look like a new car.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that going through the process that we talked about in the first financial headline there of improving your financial situation will allow you to reach out and do that at some point. But the bottom line here for car purchases, I think what we don't do is we don't, as a society anyway, typically plan ahead. And by that I mean when we get that car paid off. And that is another point of emphasis here too, because if you are stretching yourself so thin to get into the new car that you're taking on a 72-month payment schedule or an 84-month payment schedule, which I think I read is about the average now, 72 to 84 months. That's insane. So you're never going to get ahead that way. You've got to buy what you can afford and do it over a 48, 60-month time frame, and then you're still driving the car after that payment is done, and you're able to still pay yourself that payment. So many people here do that. We talk about that with our clients. That way, because if you're living without that money that you're paying for your car, you're already used to it. Don't increase your lifestyle. Continue to put that $300, $400, $500, $600 a month away once the car is paid for, and after a couple of years, when you add that cash pile to your trade, you've got an opportunity to really gain on the next loan and eventually not have a loan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff there. The last one before we leave the segment today, this was an interesting one to me. Again, it's a screenshot from, I believe, X. Yeah, what used to be Twitter. Yep. So Matt here tells us that unemployment trends can tell you when to go to cash. In other words, when to get out of the market. So the claim here is that unemployment is the only metric that matters when deciding whether to stay invested or move to cash. And you can see, if you're watching on the video version of our show, you can see that, hey, trade normally when unemployment is stable. And if unemployment rises for 2 straight months, you need to reduce your risk. And unemployment rises for 4 straight months, you need to be in 100% cash. Are you kidding me? I'm not seeing this. I mean, I would say, look, we never say never, but has never been a time in my career as a financial advisor that I would ever tell somebody to go 100% to cash. This is timing the market on steroids.
Well, and I think it's one of the social media things.
Yeah,
it's just like, hey, if I put this out there, I'm going to get attention, I'm going to get views, I'm going to all the things. And we're here to give solid advice. And I don't really care what anybody else thinks about it, not to be rude, but the thing that I value is truth. And so that's what we're going to focus on. So it's just not that easy. You can't just go, okay, well, here's where unemployment is, and so that determines what you need to do in terms of cash. What about like how old somebody is? What about, are they in their 20s or in their 80s? How much income do they need? What's the purpose of that investment that we're talking about? And are they dollar cost averaging into it? Like, there are so many variables that make this off base, in my opinion. I think it's a complete miss. Yeah,
and I think the other thing that comes to mind for me when you think about trying to time the market, he doesn't say how long to stay out.
Yeah.
And unemployment is a lag indicator. By the time we get the unemployment rate data, it has already been happening for a while. So you are behind the curve on you're not in front of anything happening for sure. Now, the other piece to that is if you get out, when do you get back in? You got to be right twice, if you're right at all. And we've talked about this on the show. We've had graphic after graphic that it's time in the market, not timing the market. And oftentimes, if you miss just the 5 best days, the 10 best days over a very long time period, you are going to see your long-term returns suffer because of it. And we know this from historical numbers that oftentimes the 5 best days of a market cycle or a market trading day comes during bad times, during when the market is in recession. You think about COVID, right? We had that plummet, and I'm sure unemployment went up then, right? So we had that plummet, but during that down time, we had some of the biggest days in decades.
And that's when you need to be in. Yeah. I'm going to chase this lagging indicator thing for just a moment. My husband and I moved. We've lived in Arkansas all of our lives except for a couple of years. We moved to Tennessee, and we moved there in 2000, and we did not know it. You know, we were young and stupid at that point. We didn't know that it was going to be a challenge for him to get a job when we got there. We moved based on a job that I already had. And we were newlyweds, and we're like, it'll be fine. We get there, you'll get a job, no problem. Because the unemployment, this lagging indicator, was kicking in right about the time that we got there. And there was no way for us in our 20s to know ahead of time that that was the thing. But following these lagging indicators, really, as you've said, Scott, everything else has already gone awry by the time we can see this. It's just like saying, well, when you get on the scales and you're up 15 pounds, then you need to start exercising. Well, do you think we should have been doing that beforehand? Maybe we should pay attention to leading indicators instead of lagging indicators.
Yeah, and not making investment decisions based on economic data solely, right? I mean, the economy matters. It might mean that you need to diversify in a different way, but really your time horizon and your risk tolerance matter more than going in and out 100% to the market based on economic data. Good stuff there. Our thanks to the marketing team for bringing it to us, and that's it for our What's Happening segment. Stay tuned. The Get Ready for the Future show starts right now.
You've been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Coming to you from the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas, this is the Get Ready for the Future show. We are glad to have you along. My name is Scott Inman, an advisor here at GenWealth, and with me is GenWealth co-founder and also advisor Janet Walker, as we get set to answer your questions today on the Get Ready for the Future show. And we've got some good ones. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
All right, our first one is from James in Little Rock. If I don't need my RMDs for living expenses, what strategies can I use to minimize taxes? Hey, for everybody else that doesn't know, RMD, required minimum distribution. James, thanks for the question. Certainly, that is a key planning point that we use here often with our clients at GenWealth. And if you don't know what an RMD is, James obviously is preparing for that, but at a certain age, depending on your birth year, the government is going to require you, the IRS is going to require you to take out a certain amount of money from your qualified plans, IRAs, 401ks, those types of things, pre-tax accounts that have never been taxed. They're going to want some of that tax money. So it starts off around 3-point-something%, a little shy of 4% of the account value of your IRA or 401k, the aggregate total, everything you have there. So it is something that needs to be planned for, because if you don't withdraw any of that money and you've got a sizable nest egg that grows all the way until you're 73 or 74 years old, which is RMD age based on your, if you're born 1960 or later, it's going to be 74, then you're talking about a potential tax bomb, because you're going to have to take out a certain amount of money. And that's what James is referencing here with his question. So the first thing, we don't know how old James is or how close he is to RMD age, Janet, but I would say that a big piece to this is creating a retirement income plan that has a withdrawal strategy that begins to unwind that IRA a little bit before he gets there, so he can control it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we look at early on. You know, when we're preparing an income plan, we're actually going to start with looking at qualified versus non-qualified pre-tax, post-tax dollars, because another factor, and this isn't really specific to James's question, but another factor relative to all the IRA money is when that money is inherited, the tax impact on the next generation, because if it's IRA money, they have to withdraw that over a 10-year time period, and it's going to be added to their already taxable ordinary income. So just something else to consider there. But one of the things, James, that we would really recommend that you consider if you are already charitably minded, and we live in a part of the country where our giving rates, like, it's not just an assumption, it is fact that we are very good at giving in this section of the country relative to the rest of the world, for sure. And so if you are already charitably minded, then think about what you would like to contribute from your IRA to a 501c3. That's key. It does have to be an official 501c3. So if you think about what you would have taken as your required minimum distribution, instead of withdrawing that, and let's say you were already going to give to charity, because most people are already doing that. If you were already going to give, let's say $7,500, well, you might take $10,000 out. You get the net from that after taxes of $7,500. You write a check for $7,500. Well, let's play this out differently. What if you just took the $10,000 and went straight to the charity? Well, then that benefits the charity more because they get that total amount. And for you, it's not adding to your total taxable income, which means things like your Medicare premiums. Your Medicare premiums can actually be increased because of having to take required minimum distributions. But by doing this qualified charitable distribution and going straight to the charity, you're satisfying the required minimum distribution, but you're not adding to your taxable income. So it's a win for you. It's a win for the charity as well. And even if you wanted to still just contribute the $7,500, that's okay. You can do that. So just think through, what charities are important to you, and then we have the ability at GenWealth to take your prior year tax return and plug that in and play with the numbers and go, okay, where are we on your income for this year? And at what point do you go over the threshold where your Medicare premiums are going to be negatively impacted? The premiums are going to increase. We want to stay below that. And so we can be very intentional in the QCD planning so that you can decrease the impact. And one other thing, Scott, I feel like I just have gone on a roll here. One other thing to be aware of, James, if you're not quite RMD age, if you're thinking about it, you might be old enough for the QCD, even if you're not old enough to have the required minimum distribution. You can start doing a qualified charitable distribution on the day that you turn 70 and a half. Mm-hmm. So even if you're not, 73, 74, where you're having to take it personally, you can go ahead and get the tax benefit of doing the qualified charitable distribution now.
And when you think about retirees from a tax return standpoint, very rarely do we see anybody who is still itemizing their deductions. Mm-hmm. They're taking the standard deduction. So gifts to charity, if you take the standard deduction in the traditional way, you're not getting any value from that from a tax perspective. So this allows you to still get a tax break from making that charitable donation. I do want to correct something I said earlier. I knew as soon as I said it was wrong, but for some reason my brain wouldn't connect it. RMD age is not 74. It's 75 for those born 1960 or later. There's not a 74. It goes from 73 for those born 1951 to 1959, and then 75 for those born 1960 or later.
Of course, the 1960 people have got another decade before they need, right at it anyway,
right.
Before they need to take that. One thing that's important to understand, James, on this relative to qualified charitable distributions, if your money is still in a 401k, as an example, you cannot do a QCD from a 401k. It has to come from an IRA. Now, in the IRA realm, it could be a traditional IRA, an inherited IRA. It could be a simple or a SEP. If it's a simple or a SEP, and let me just distinguish here, simple IRAs and SEP IRAs are associated with a company. So it, just like the 401k would be associated with a company. With a simple or a SEP, you can do it from there if those are inactive. So if they're active, they're treated like a 401k, and you cannot do the QCD from those accounts.
Hey, I want to remind you before we move on to our next question that we now offer estate planning services. We've got an in-house estate planning specialist. So you can reach out today if you call us at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You can book your consultation with our estate planning specialist. If you haven't done any estate planning, you haven't created a will or a trust, power of attorney, healthcare directive, it's a great opportunity to sit down and discuss that. That's the number, 866-653-PLAN, 866-653-7526. Our next question on the Get Ready for the Future show is from Christian in Bryant. I'm 39 with $400,000 saved for retirement. I have a savings rate of 30% and I have no debt. Based on my current savings rate and lifestyle, what's a realistic early retirement age for me? Hey, good for you, first of all, Christian. 39 with $400,000 saved for retirement. You're in good shape. You're on a great path. You've got no debt. The savings rate of 30% is fantastic. And what it tells me is you're living well below your means. In other words, your income is not needed. You don't need all of your income to provide your lifestyle. So that kind of gives me a little bit of insight into saying that you're probably set up to potentially have enough assets at an earlier age if you keep doing that. Because not only are you saving at a great clip, you're going to get some great growth over the next decade or so, and you don't need a bunch to live on. Now, having said that, we need to kind of discuss the things that you do need to think about if you're looking at retiring at an early age.
So one of the primary concerns that I would have is whether this $400,000 is all in retirement plans, like from the minds of the IRS. Are they looking at it and going, it's in a 401k, it's in TSP, it's in a 403b, etc.? Because those dollars are not easily accessed prior to age 59 and a half. Notice that I did say they're not easily accessed. It's not that you cannot get to them, but there are some very strict rules around accessing those dollars prior to age 59 and a half. So when you talk about retiring early, I believe one of the most important things to consider on the financial side of that is what dollars and how. What dollars are you going to access prior to 59 and a half, and how will you do that? So you may want to consider having some non-qualified money that you have that you can bridge the gap to age 59 and a half, and also just depending on how early you do it and what's your lifestyle going to be like. Like if your house is paid off, but you travel a whole lot, then you still have a really high income need. So begin to paint the picture. What does your activity and therefore your money spend, what does that look like in retirement? So Christian, take some time to dream about that and begin to build the picture. And from there, we can build out, all right, what does that mean in terms of the amount of assets that you need to have and how they're invested?
Yeah, when you think about some easy math, if people are listening in Christian's general situation that, hey, I'd love to retire early and I've got a nice nest egg started, the time that you have is going to be so valuable to you, Christian. When you think about the rule of 72, we've talked about that a little bit as well. So if you take your savings out of it, your savings rate, your future contributions out of it, and just say, hey, what's that $400,000 going to do? The rule of 72 says if you divide 72 by an estimated rate of return, and we would use 8% as the max on that. Don't get into the 10 or the 12s, just stay around 8. If it's in equity, that's a long-term historical average that could potentially be doable for you in the future. Then that means your money is going to double every 9 years. 72 divided by 8 is 9. So that $400,000 becomes $800,000 in 9 years, and then in another 9 years you could be looking at $1.6 million, and that's not even counting what you're adding to that. So you have a real opportunity to have a fantastic early retirement from an asset level, but you have to really think through, as Janet's already talked about, the purpose. What will you retire to? How will you spend your time? And is it a challenge to live on the income or to live on the income that you're currently living on. I mean, would you like to do more than that? Because if you retire early, you're still going to have a lot of time on your hands with potentially good health that you're going to want to do something. You're not going to, I mean, a lot of people I think get into this concept, I'm going to retire as early as I can, but are we going to sit around on our couch and watch YouTube all day? I mean, you've got to have a plan.
Well, and I would even challenge you to think about, do you enjoy what you're doing? Because this is not 100% accurate across the board, but most people who have accumulated $400,000 in their retirement by the age that you are actually really enjoy doing what they're doing. It tells me you're probably really good at something. And so if you enjoy it, you may want to continue to work for a longer period of time. Scott, you and I have talked about this, but personally, I have a ready to retire date. I do not have a retirement date. At some point, I will. But I have a financially ready to retire date. And so I think that's what I would begin solving for at this point is when you want to be able to retire. Whether you actually decide to do it or not may be a different question.
This is the question of the week. Thanks, Christian, for reaching out. We'll send you a Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being named the question of the week. What we need from you is an email. Send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com, Christian, so let us know where we need to send that tumbler. And you could be the question of the week next week if you get a question to us. We are always taking those. You can text the question. You can leave a voicemail with the question to 501-381-5228. It's 501-381-5228. All right, 2 more questions up on the show. Angel from Fayetteville is next. I'm getting nervous about the market. Should I be increasing my cash position? And if so, what's the right percentage? Well, I'm glad you asked us and not the guy who says, look at the unemployment rate. Listen, this is a common thing. I don't know how old Angel is, but it runs the gamut from people in their 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s. You can get nervous about the market if you read the financial headlines. The saber rattling that President Trump's doing over Greenland right now has got the market on edge. We're at all-time highs. Can it continue? There's all kinds of reasons to be nervous about the stock market every day. But you have to be able to step back, stay objective, and build a plan. And that's what we do here. We're financial planners first. We have to know what we're trying to accomplish before we can lay out the path that gets there. Now, having said that, Angel, I would ask, how old are you and when will you be needing to take income from those assets that you have invested in the market? In other words, when are you going to sell something, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the real, I think, important things that people forget. I had somebody email me after hearing me say this on the show and said thanks for it, because you don't. It sounds simple, but it's true. Your account value is just a number on a page if you don't sell anything. And so when you're nervous about the market and the market goes down and your account value drops 20%, if you don't sell into that, it is just a number on a page. Now, if you need it next week, we got a different discussion, right? We don't need to be all in on the market.
Yeah.
But
we shouldn't have been allocated like that in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
But if she's younger, if she's decades out from needing to sell something, staying in the market is the best way to achieve your long-term financial goals.
So we're going to talk in a moment about what we call a flooring and bucketing strategy, which is what we use for all of our ready-to-retire clients so that they're prepared to take income, whether it's in a good market or a 2008. Before I go there, though, I want to talk about back in 2011. You know, everybody remembers what happens in 2008. Market was down 40%. Most people don't recall 2011. It now looks like a blip on the radar, but at the time, it scared a whole lot of people. Our credit rating as a country was downgraded, and so the market immediately reacted to that and took a pretty significant dip. John and I, my business partner, we were at a financial advisor conference, and one day there were lots of people, and the next day most of them had flown home. Financial advisors in a panic, going back to like, I got to handle everything with all my clients. And we're like, flooring and bucketing strategy, like we're good, you know. But across what was then hundreds of clients firm-wide, I got one singular phone call from a client in a panic. Nobody else called in a panic. One client did. Scott, she was in her 20s. So she did not have a flooring and bucketing strategy because that's what we do for retirement income. And obviously she didn't need that in her 20s. But my point is, she was in her 20s. She had plenty of time. Like now she might be 40. She's still got plenty of time, you know, before she's going to need retirement income. But we had not spent a lot of time providing education for her because she was relatively new to us. We hadn't spent a ton of time yet providing education about what happens when the market drops. With our retirees, we try to make sure that they really understand here's the impact and, frankly, the lack thereof when something like this happens. So let's talk about that for a little bit with flooring and bucketing.
Yeah, so if, Angel, you are close to retirement, and we call the retirement red zone 10 years or less away from needing to use your assets for income, or if you're up against it in the next week or so, or if you're in retirement, this is incredibly important for you. So you need to take a look at your investments as not one account value, but as buckets of money. So when we talk about that, we're talking about laying a floor of income, making sure that your required income needs are met with guaranteed income from sources like Social Security. And if you need more, then you may need a bucket borrowed from your portfolio to purchase a guaranteed income product like an annuity to add to beef up the amount of guaranteed income you have so that your basic lifestyle is covered no matter what happens in the market, and you won't get nervous about the market because the checks are still coming no matter what happens. Now, with the bucketing, though, with the remainder of your assets or all of the assets, if you don't need the annuity, you're setting up an investment strategy that basically controls what you control or what you sell and when you sell it. You can see on the screen, if you're watching on the video version of the show, that the first two buckets are conservative. We're not really in the market with those buckets that you're going to need. And if you think about a bucket being about a 5-year bucket of income, then for the next 10 years or so, over the first 10 years of retirement, you're not really exposed very much, if at all, to the stock market. So if the market makes you nervous and the market goes down, that piece of your income is still intact. It will not take the brunt of the market downturn. Now, as we step out in time to bucket 3, bucket 4, bucket 5, we are taking on another measure of risk for the possible long-term reward that we would receive for doing that. The moderate bucket in the middle is an alternative strategy, and then the growth buckets out in the back, that's where you're going to be mainly exposed to the stock market, to the equity market. So if the market goes down in the near term, in the next year, in the next 3 years, and you are inside of this investment strategy and you're working that plan, you know that the big brunt of the downturn in your portfolio happened in buckets that you're not going to need for 15 plus years. So when you think about that, Janet, the 15-year time horizon, there's never been a rolling period of the S&P 500 index that's been negative after 15 years. You're giving time to heal those wounds in the market.
So to give that context relative to 2008, so the market was down 40% and lots of people were, oh my gosh, what about my retirement income? Going back to that bucketing philosophy, and I'll say everybody's going to have a different number of buckets and they represent different time periods, but what we just illustrated, there were 5 buckets and each one of them is for 5 years apiece. So if you think about those first 2 buckets, they were labeled as conservative, that's 10 years worth of income. So from the low point, it actually wasn't in 2008, it was in March of 2009. So that low point then would have taken you, that 10 years rather, would have taken you from the low point to 2019. Add on another 5 years, you're at 2024, and think about, the market was in a really good place in 2024 relative to 2008. So you've bought yourself some time. So now we would just now be almost 2 years into some of those growth-oriented investments. And if you look at growth-oriented investments now compared to where they were at the low point in March of 2009, it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
So that's the concept. applied to real life scenarios of what happened in 2008, if you have floored income, meaning guaranteed income of Social Security, pension, annuity if it's necessary, and then you have the buckets, it doesn't matter what happens on any given day in the market.
Yeah, you can refer back to that plan. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a judgment call here. We've got about less than 4 minutes left until we hit final thoughts.
Are we auctioneering this?
I think we can, we can expand a little bit more into different horizons because I think we've piqued some interest. So we're going to hold our last question for the next week's show. But when you think about one other thing that kind of stood out to me in Angel's question, should I be increasing my cash position? I don't want to totally discount that piece, but I would say maybe, right? So if you are close to retirement, I would not do it at the expense of getting out or of selling anything. I'm not telling you to increase your cash position by trading out of stocks. What I am telling you and anybody close to retirement is building up more cash is a very good thing as you approach retirement. And what's that going to do for you? Well, we talk about an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. I think when you enter retirement, that probably needs to be a little bit more if you can make that happen in your working years, because what's it going to do for you? You're going to have money that has already been taxed. So if there is a lump sum need, like replacing a furnace, replacing an appliance, or even a new vehicle purchase that needs to be made, you don't have to take more out of taxable accounts. You've got after-tax money sitting on the sidelines. So I think there is a reason for Angel to be considering her cash position, but it's not by trading out of stocks.
I'm completely in alignment on that. One of the other things that transitions in your way of thinking in retirement relative to cash is, in the past, if you had, pick your dollar amount, you had X amount of money set aside as your emergency fund, and then you had to use some of it, well then on your next however many paychecks, you set money back to replenish that. And I have had countless conversations over the years about how it feels really different in retirement, because when you do need to replenish that savings, that emergency fund, you're not doing it from a paycheck. You're doing it from your investments at this point, and that just feels different. So, Scott, I'm completely with you on the need, the wisdom behind having a larger emergency fund than normal going into retirement. I think that's absolutely an important consideration.
And I'll build on that a little bit. I had a conversation with a client just yesterday. In fact, we built them their retirement income plan. And again, the importance of having that plan, knowing what kind of income that your assets will support so that you don't run out of money during your retirement, is so key here. But they were taking a larger piece out initially in their first year of retirement as they approached taking their Social Security. So if you think about that, they're taking a chunk out of their assets that we intended to lower when we added their Social Security benefit, right? So that their overall monthly income stayed the same roughly, because we would lower their distributions to account for the amount that they were now taking in Social Security. Well, he asked me, he said, can I go ahead and continue that amount and not lower it? So I ran some numbers just recently and sent him an email this morning, in fact, to let him know that, your plan will support you continuing to do that. Why did he want to do that? He wanted to build up a cash savings account. If the assets will support safely withdrawing more than he actually needed on a monthly basis, that allowed him to stay within the same tax bracket that he was currently in and be able to build some after-tax money on the sidelines. Because really, that's about what it is here when you think about, if you have that flexibility. Sometimes you don't have that in your plan, but if you have the flexibility, it makes sense, going back to that first question we had about RMDs, to unwind that IRA. It doesn't mean you have to spend it. You stay within the tax bracket you're currently in, fill that up if you want to, and not jump a tax bracket, and have cash on the sidelines for those lump sum purchases or once-in-a-lifetime trips, whatever reason you want to use that cash for. Okay, I ran right through that final bill.
That's okay.
It's shortening what you have time to say.
Not
I'm
a problem.
About that.
I'm just thinking about, even relative to what you were saying, the importance of planning
Yep.
and having a living plan. It's not one time on paper on purpose, but as life changes, as this person wants to build up more cash, for their retirement reserves. I get it. Also, though, like the qualified charitable distribution question that we had earlier, if you're 70 and a half or older and you have IRA money, and you have not yet talked with an advisor about whether a qualified charitable distribution is in your best interest or not, it's time to do that. Run the numbers, do the math, figure out what it looks like for you. And I think in most people's situation, you would be amazed at the impact positively for you as well as for whatever 501c3 it is that you really care about.
Yeah, lots to the retirement landscape that you not only need a plan for, but you need to work with a financial advisor who builds that plan initially and then continues to have that relationship with you all the way through your retirement for all these changing things that can happen. If you'd like to get started with the GenWealth Ready to Retire process, it's really easy to take the first step. Just call us at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526, or send an email to info@getreadyforthefuture.com. We're out of time for this week's show. Thanks for everybody sending in questions. We want to hear from you for next week's Get Ready for the Future show. Send a text, leave a voicemail at 501-381-5228, and we'll see you again next time.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com, or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.